I want to call the Finance and Law Subcommittee to order. It's Wednesday, July 14th, 2021. First item on the agenda is student activities, and there aren't any. Second item is food service bid recommendations. See attached memo. Brenda, you want to handle that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martin. As you see on the first food services recommendation for the bid, coming from our food service director, we are awarding the bid to Cape Dairy, also doing business as White Brothers All-Star, and as they were the sole bidder. They have provided milk to our district in the past years, so I do understand that we always are worried about if they're a sole bidder, but despite the sole bidder, the price increase is reasonable comparing to the last few years. I did pull the reports of what we have purchased milk with, and I've worked with that with our food services director, Karen Papa, and as you see the differences in the bid price from this year, this current past school year, to the new current bid, it is a very minimal increase, and we are okay with that recommendation to be awarding it to Cape Dairy.
Motion would be in order to Mr. Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Mr. Martin.
That's Cabral.
Ms. Moynihan, I don't have a problem with this. I'm just curious. I'm assuming everything else in the world, for whatever reason, COVID is doubled and tripled and quadrupled. That's not the case here, but I'm assuming that this increase, although it was 16% for chocolate milk, seems to be a little high.
It looks just like
The prices seem to be reasonable. Is this the same, what I would call delta or difference from last year, roughly?
Correct. As you see there, it's only for a current bid for the chocolate milk. We went from a little over 25 cents to 30 cents. 1% milk from almost 25 cents to 26.5 cents, and then the skim milk from 22 cents to 25 cents. So
it just seems year to year just goes up just a tad.
It does. So honestly, the way we've compared it to previous years, we are seeing the same amount of increase. So nothing to be alarmed about as being the sole bidder.
Thank you. That's exactly, nothing to be alarmed about. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, move that we accept the recommendation of the food service director and award the bid to Cape Dairy LLC, doing business as White Brothers All-Star, Inc.
Second.
motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion on this particular bid? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
None opposed, so voted.
The second bid, as you will see, is our paper bid for food services, and there were two bids that came in. One was WB Mason, another one was Mansfield Paper. As you will see, the breakdowns that we purchased or we've requested bid amounts for were lunch trays, utensils, sporks, plates, straws, and gloves. As you see, WB Mason is the lower bidder, and they are the ones that the food services director has recommended to award the bid to. And also, if you see there, anything that is considered unbid items or the items that are not listed on here, WB Mason did say about 20%, and Mansfield Paper said 25%. So the food services would be just like this one here in the previous bid. This is not affecting school budget. It will be paid through the food services enterprise account. Again, recommendation is to award the bid to WB Mason, who is the lowest bidder.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Souza.
Thank you. Move that we accept the recommendation of the food service director for WB Mason as the overall lowest bidder.
I'll second the motion, but I do have a question. Do we have any idea how supply lines are running right now? Because I know it was difficult to get certain products out of a lot of these online services like WB Mason, including WB Mason themselves. I had trouble ordering something from them. Are you confident that the lines of supply are doing well now?
I have worked personally with WB Mason, and things have been working very well. I mean, you can never tell if something is going to be out of stock. As we all know, there's shortages everywhere, but they are, our vendors are very much vocal in being upfront with us if there are any issues with the supply chain. So as of right now, we don't see it to be a problem, and the vendor, WB Mason, has been very good to the district.
Again, I've had good experience with them in the past, but I did have some difficulty last year with some difficulty to get products. So I just want to be sure that they're doing okay, but I approve them otherwise.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. I just have one comment. That is, on the unbid items, we wouldn't necessarily have to go with either one of those vendors. We could go with best business practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. But they do just put that in there just in case if we wanted to, but that's what the food services director does do. She does do the best business practices. She does watch her penny.
All right, so a motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. And we'll move on to number 3, which has been around for a long time, at least the item has. Pest control service recommendation.
So this year, we went ahead and we requested, and we sent out our proposal to other pest control vendors on the state bid list. And this year, in a while, we received additional bids. And right now, currently, our pest control company is Flynn Pest Control. They did go ahead and submit the lowest bid, substantial amount as well. And again, as you will see, that we are recommending the Flynn Pest Control, who is our current vendor for pests. And just so you understand as well, their bid amount of $64.80 is the same amount that we have currently in our contract that we just finished as well. So there was no increase from them.
Mr. Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Moynihan, is this bid for Flynn now, is that going to cover everything for what we need? I mean, there's a substantial difference in the rest of them, so I always get suspicious, but I understand from reading this that it says it's going to cover everything for the fiscal year. So we're talking, did you review the other bids with the other bidders to make sure that there was nothing missed?
Well, what happened is we've been using the request for proposal that we have used in the past. And then again, you only really know what you know. And so now looking back at other vendors and seeing what they're submitting, I think that our request for proposals going forward may update and ask for additional other items that maybe we weren't aware of newer procedures.
Yeah, thank you. That's always good to know too, because things change in that industry rapidly, and there's always things that you may need that you don't know you need.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we accept the recommendation of the administration for Flynn Pest Control as the overall lowest and responsible bidder.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. And once again, I just want to make a comment. We have never had a problem with Flynn, right? I know they've been servicing us for a long time, even back when I was working.
No, we have no problems. If we have an issue, we call them, they address it right away. I've spoken to the owner on other issues that we've had, and he was very responsive. So no, I can't complain about that, no.
Okay. So a motion has been made to accept the Flynn Pest Control as the lowest responsible bidder for the amount of $6,480. And any more comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. And we'll move on to use of facilities. It's just a memo that's attached. Does anyone have any questions on that?
No.
Will we receive and place it on file?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. And finally, we have bills payable. FY '21 in the amount of $2,708. Wait a minute now, let me run that by me again. $2,708,176.09. And for FY '22, $55,776.16. seems like they should be switched.
Well, actually, if you think about it, Mr. Martin, the school committee did go ahead and recommended that we could go ahead and purchase pre-buys. So that's what we did do.
Okay.
So that's where you'll see a substantial amount for FY '21 purchases.
Mr. Souza, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fury. Mr. Fury had his hand up first.
Oh,
Yeah, one concern I had about item on the warrant is I noticed that we're reimbursing out-of-pocket expenses from Mr. Cabral and Mrs. Bonneau that are, for technology, that are really significant. And I just feel it's kind of unfair that they, as individuals, have tied up that much of their own money waiting to process things. And I would hope that we can do some accounting in the future so that they have some funds to tap into, that they don't have to be tying up their own resources that badly. In the case of Mrs. Bonneau, it was actually a measurable percentage of her salary. And I just don't think that's fair. I think they need to be supported as best they can.
Mr. Souza.
thank you, Mr. Martin.
I got white hair, he doesn't have white hair.
I have I have Mr. Cabral in between you, so sometimes I'm looking at him and thinking of you, or vice versa. Yeah, I think Mr. Cabral maybe wanted to answer that. Did you have something to say on that, or we can send that to the administration for?
No, the only thing I would
see?
say is I appreciate Mr. Fiore's comments, and the reason why we subscribe for those platforms individually is because it saves the district money. If we were to put in for a corporate account, it would be a substantial increase versus what we're paying out of pocket. So I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Fiore. I'm fine as long as the school committee, and I know Mrs. Bonneau is fine, as long as the school committee supports the reimbursement. We are fine paying for it out of pocket because we know it does save the district funds of money long-term over the course of the year. But thank you for your support.
I just did want the two of you to know that it's appreciated.
Yeah. Wendy, if you could, through the chair of this subcommittee, if you could just make a note that the committee appreciates that, it would be helpful. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I just have one more item. Ms. Moynihan, on page 19, mechanical air controls, I see that that's coming out of a grant, so I'm assuming it's coming out of some kind of a COVID money. So we had some repairs on something for HVAC?
Yes, we did. Mechanical Air Controls helped us out in our HVAC systems at the Letty School. They are a city vendor that the HVAC system does, the HVAC department does use.
Yep.
And so they did come in and assist us in repairing at Letty.
All right, thank you. So that's not too bad, just one item. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we pay the warrant and the bills payable as presented. FY '21 in the amount of $2,708,176.09, and FY '22 $55,776.16.
I'll second
And a
that.
motion has been made and seconded, and I have one comment on paying out of pocket. I know it's been a while, but if there's a large sum of money that, you know, an employee is asked to pay for something and then get reimbursed, we might be able to work out something with the city auditor where we could actually expedite the payment of that order. So, under a special warrant type of thing. So just keep that in mind. If it's, you know, because again, it's not, I know you get reimbursed, but sometimes these quantities can be fairly large. And why should you have to take it out of your account? We could probably do something with the auditor's office and, you know, they've done that in the past. Not recently that I know of, but I know we did it in the past. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear. So a motion has been made and seconded. Let's do each one individually, okay? If we can, in case any colleagues have comments. So, motion to pay the FY '21 bills payable in the amount of $2,708,176.09. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. And for FY '22, $55,776.16. And once again, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Thank you for the discussion. And facilities? No, shouldn't be much other than cleaning.
Well, I'll give a quick update since we are getting a little bit, but yes, we are cleaning in all of our schools. Our custodians are busily working and getting our schools waxed and clean for the upcoming school year. Just so the committee is aware that the schematic design project for Galligan has been submitted to the MSBA. So what happened is they've now pushed that project, which is the replacements of windows and doors in the boiler system at Galligan. That has now been submitted to the MSBA to see if it will be an approved project and funded through the MSBA and of course the city. The alternative high school, also another project being funded by the city and also with the MSBA. We're currently replacing all of our windows. So that, as you see, if you go by the alternative high school and you see plywood and all, that is being done. We're getting all of our windows replaced in that building too. And lastly, I'm very excited to say that we just received our end of the year report audit with 0 findings. So very excited about that. And I could not do it alone. I have a great crew. Sue Bullock, Irene Clausen, and many others helped me out, and I can't thank them enough of helping get the district's end of the year report done without any findings. And I didn't ask Mr. Cabral for anything either.
It's not fun. Any discussion on any of those?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we express our appreciation to the business office staff for their more or less perfection.
Thank you. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So voted. And a motion to adjourn would be...
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Thank you.
Steve, let us...
Call the meeting to order. And for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Lord, as we begin this session, let us acknowledge your goodness and mercy and ask your blessings on all our deliberations. We thank you for this opportunity to be of service to the community and to the young people entrusted to our care.
Amen. Thank you. Roll call, please,
And the
Mrs.
roll call,
Fagan?
yes. Ms. Doherty? Mr. Pulowski?
Here.
Mr. Fiore?
Present.
Mrs. Fagan's present. Mr. Martin?
Present.
Mrs. Almeida? Mr. DeMello?
Present.
Chairman Souza?
Present.
Mayor O'Connell.
Present.
And, Mayor, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence. We have 2 members of our community who recently passed away. One was the husband of Mary Snow, who was a teacher at Parker Middle School. And the most recent one is Lisa Eamon Kudo, who was a graduate of Taunton High School. She was only 43 years old. She had two younger children, one who just recently graduated, I think a year ago, from the high school. She had a 8-year fight with cancer. She passed away on Friday. Please keep these families in your thoughts and your prayers. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. Approval of the minutes of just June 23rd, 2021.
Second?
Is there a second? Motion made and seconded to move approval. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so voted. Is there any public input at this time? Okay, we will move on.
I'd
Mr.
like to
Meyer,
make a motion to go out of the regular order of business
can we get a second?
to item J.
Executive session. Can we get a second? Second. Motion made and seconded to go out of order of business. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so voted. Mr. Martin?
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation on personnel matter pursuant to exemption 3, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, and to reconvene in open session.
Motion made and seconded. All-
Roll call
Oh,
vote.
thank you.
Call.
On roll call, Mrs. Fagan.
Yeah, Ms. Doherty? Yes. Mr. Pawlowski?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore?
Yes.
Mrs. Fagan votes yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida? Yes. Mr. DeMello?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Yes.
Steve, let me know when we're clear. Mr. Jakes, let me know when. We on? Thank you. The school committee has called back to order. We are still in executive session. Chair will entertain a motion to come out of executive session. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Isn't that roll call?
Roll call vote, Mrs. Fagan, yes.
Ms. Doherty? Mr. Pawlowski?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore?
Yes.
Mrs. Fagan votes yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida? Did you say yes, Mrs. Almeida? Come on, please. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Mr. DeMello?
Yes.
And Mr. Souza?
Yes. There was one motion made in executive session to accept the agreement worked out by Attorney Gay, and we will repeat that motion in open session. Ms. Doherty, could you just make that motion one more time that was made inside, please, to accept the agreement? Yeah, accept the agreement. Yep. And who made the second? Mr. Pawlowski seconded the motion. On a roll call vote, Mrs. Fagan.
Ms. Doherty? Yes. Mr. Pawlowski?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore?
Yes.
Mrs. Fagan votes yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Almeida? Yes. Mr. DeMello?
Yes.
And Chairman Souza?
Yes. And we need a motion to go back to the regular
moved.
order of business. Do I hear a second?
Jody seconded.
Thank you, Mrs. Almeida. On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is D, Taunton Public Schools FY21 School Choice Report. Mr. Cabral.
Thank you, Chairman Souza. So what has become an annual presentation? Every year around this time, since I've been superintendent and as the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, we have provided the school committee with an overview of our school choice data as well as our charter school data at the conclusion of the fiscal year. So this year's report will be presented by the Director of Student Services and Transportation, Kathleen Perry, as well as the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, Brenda Moynihan. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Kathleen Perry and Brenda Moynihan, who will walk you through a PowerPoint presentation outlining data points regarding school choice and charter schools. So Brenda and Kathy, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Superintendent Cabral. So today we're going to be talking about how school choice in charter school has been going in our district this past year. So what is school choice? So currently, there in FY92, so in 1992, there were 32 districts in the state of Massachusetts that were participating in school choice. And then just in last year, in FY '21, 194 districts, including virtual schools, were participating in school choice. So regular education tuition rate is about $5,000 per student. So any child that chooses to go to a school, it chooses to elect to go to a different school, the sending district will pay $5,000 per student to the receiving district. Special education, depending upon what the special education services that the student will receive, it will be added to the $5,000 rate. So depending upon, again, the services, then you go ahead and increase that amount. There is no cap, though, on special education charges. And so currently, the state average special education increment is based on the current estimate about additionally over $4,000 in addition to the $5,000 rate. And then lastly, the virtual rate is a little bit more. So a virtual rate, if a student is attending, it will be $8,666, and that should not say plus, it should say includes a $75 per pupil administrative fee.
So this next slide is an overview of school choice enrollment and tuition in Massachusetts. So I thought it was important to show the overall tuition and how it's grown steadily, and then we'll look at Taunton compared. So as you can see, in 2008, and this, again, as Ms. Moynihan said, school choice started, well, for us in 1996, but this actually starts in 2008, and you can see that there were 10,790 students. The blue line is the student line. They were participating in school choice with a dollar figure of 62 million. So that's what was happening. And as you can see, it's increased steadily throughout the state. There's a particular jump, I think, in 2018 to 2019. And it's interesting because we had a similar, ours was similar as well. So in 2021, we are now at 17,161 students in Massachusetts participating in school choice with a total price tag of $113 million, a little bit over $113 million. So I kept, I was a little perplexed when I first saw this slide. This is from the DESE website. And then realizing that although it doesn't look like the student number jumped as high as the monetary number, we then realized that in 2008 the per pupil expenditure was lower. So that's kind of the reason why you see not only an increase in students but a larger increase in the dollar figure. So that's the overall state. The next slide is Taunton. So as you can see, in 2015, we were receiving more students than we were sending. In fact, 15. In 2016, that switched. And so we were now sending 22 more students than we were receiving. Then we started on a pattern that we really want to try to change. So we then moved up to 2017, where we had a differential of 36 students. And then 2018, where we had a differential of 54 students. So in other words, we were sending more than we were receiving, 54 students more. So the good news is we actually started going in the right direction in 2019. In 2019, it started to drop a little bit. So we went from 54 to 49. In 2020, it dropped even further. We went from 49 to 41. So in that 2-year span, we gained 13 students. So that, I think we were moving in the right direction and we were very hopeful. And then, of course, 2021, things, for various reasons, made a turn. So now we're at 101. Now, I think it's really important to realize that these numbers are not necessarily real time. As a matter of fact, since last Thursday, I've had 5 families call for school choice. So we're in the process of doing the paperwork. So, that's kind of the difficulty in trying to capture the exact numbers because it's fluent. So, so that's where we are right now. That's where Taunton is right now.
So if you look at the next map here, is you're just seeing the average of different different cities and towns that are around us that are participating in school choice. And as you can see, the newest one is Attleboro, where they started to receive receive students for school choice in 2019 and 2020. Bridgewater Rainham started in 2019-2020, only receiving high school students and not accepting school choice students in the elementary. And also new is Seekonk. Seekonk went from a choice school district to a not accepting school choice in the school year of 2020 and 2021. So here are the enrollment and tuition trends for Taunton Public Schools. As you can see, the left side is the receiving. So the people or students choosing Taunton as their education. So as you can see, we have a steady increase of receiving students in 2014. And then sending students, well, we've seen an increase, but even though we've seen an increase in sending, you do see that it has been a small trend in going higher in sending. So again, we do see an increase, but not an alarming increase. But again, as you will know, and as Mrs. Perry will discuss, some of the things that she has been doing with her office and attracting more students to choose Taunton. So here is more what we want to say, comparing apples to apples. So this is the FY20 receiving and sending tuition, and this is all coming out from the DESE website. And I'd like you to just look at more of, these are all, of course, the area schools, but looking at apples to apples, let's focus on the urban schools of Brockton, Fall River, New Bedford, Quincy, and of course, Taunton. And if you go ahead and look at there, Taunton Public Schools receives the most number of students choosing Taunton for school choice than any of the urban school districts. Now, although Taunton is the second of the least amount of sending students, it's not really very far behind Fall River with only 3 students. So if you think about it, comparing other urbans, Taunton is really faring well compared to the other urbans.
Exactly, the gap is definitely lower. So for this slide, this is where our kids are going, okay? And so as you can see clearly, Berkeley and Norton are the 2 surrounding towns where most of our students are attending. Now I can speak on a little bit about Berkeley. When we began, well, as we've traveled through the pandemic, certain schools did hybrid, other schools had the kids in full-time. So I think when we looked at parents that were looking for options in the fall that had difficulty with the hybrid model, they looked to some of the virtual schools, they looked to some of the charter schools, and Berkeley had, offered the 5-day. So I think that was a bit of a push. With Norton, no. Norton did the hybrid, similar to us. Well, it was actually, they had Mondays as remote days, and then they did Tuesday, Thursday, and Wednesday, Friday. That was their model. So that's where our kids are going. So it is interesting. I think obviously proximity has a lot to do with it, clearly, because they're so close to us. Now, where are we receiving the students from? You can see a large percentage of students from Bridgewater Rainham. I mean, 33 students in school choice, and as a matter of fact, as I mentioned the phone call, 2 of the families were from Bridgewater, so that number actually would be higher than 33. So that's interesting to me, because I get many phone calls from families in Bridgewater and Rainham wanting to bring their kids to Taunton to take advantage of the many things that we have. Another reason is proximity. When I actually looked at some of the addresses of some of the students from Rainham, some of the addresses were close to Route 44, the 99, so areas like that, behind Shaw's, behind Stop and Shop. So again, it's also proximity has a little bit to do with it as well. And then of course Fall River would be the next highest.
So now we're switching over to charter school overview. And if you recall, this was authorized by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Education Reform Act of 1993, where we see that charter schools were an independent, or are an independent public school that operate under a 5-year charter granted by Department of Education. So each child that the Commonwealth Charter School enrolls, it receives a tuition amount from the state equal to the per pupil amount calculated by the Department of Ed's finance. So what does that really mean? Well, the state then deducts that same amount from the sending district's state aid account, and then that sending district being the school district in which the student resides. So the charter school reimbursement works a little bit differently. So what happens is in 2011, it did, DESE changed the way that districts would be reimbursed when a child would go ahead and choose to go to a charter school, where they would reimburse over a 6-year period of 100% and then 25% to the city for the next 5 years. And I'll explain that in the next slide. So where you're seeing that Taunton students are choosing charter schools, and as you can see there's a number of all the charter students, all the number of students that are choosing to go to charter. This past school year, we had 78 students that chose charter schools. Now again, another thing that we saw the little bit of the jump was charter schools were going full 5 days. Many of them were going full 5 days. So just so you can understand that, going back to our budget of for this upcoming year, FY22 charter reimbursement to the city was over $408,000. So 60% of that charter reimbursement, that equals from the $408,000, $164,929 has now been given back to the city of Taunton. And we had just found out by our budget director, city budget director, Gil Enos, that has been added to our appropriation. So again, our original appropriation has now been increased due to over $164,000 due to the charter school reimbursement.
You know, and although it has been increasing, it hasn't been increasing at a very high level. So in FY20, we had 71 students at charter school. In FY21, we had 78. So yes, it's an increase, but it's not, it's small compared to the increase that took place in FY19. FY19, we had 57 students at charter school. FY20, we had 71. So it was a much larger gap. So as I said, I feel as though, although yes, our sending is increasing, our receiving is increasing. Our receiving isn't increasing as quickly as our sending is receiving, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction. So when we talked, parents, as you know, I spend a lot of time talking to parents, calling, meeting, and these are just some of the quotes that I received from them. But the top one, I actually added that quote because I got that, this was a week ago. I spoke to a mom on the phone, and her exact quote was, "My husband grew up in Taunton his whole life and speaks very highly of your education system." And this was another family enrolling from Bridgewater Rainham. So if you look at, some of the reasons why they enroll are the same reasons why they choose another school. So it may be a work thing, it may be a location thing, it may be a comfort level. I live in Lakeville, but I grew up in Taunton. Or it may be, I really I've studied the Taunton schools, I love your website, a lot of parents will say that to me. I look at all the opportunities you have at the high school, and I want my child there. So these are just quotes from parents. It's very similar, I think, to the presentation that we had done before. And again, as I said, why do families choose to leave Taunton Public Schools? And these are actual families that I spoke to, and these are some of the reasons. So work is a very important, that's a big factor for a lot of parents. If they're working in Avon, or they're working, toward Boston, it's easier for them to bring their child with them, bring them to a school system that's close. And obviously parents want to be in close proximity during the day. with their children. So that, that's a reason. And there are other reasons. Sometimes people just feel like they want a smaller setting. So that's, as I said, they're leaving and they're coming for very similar reasons. So you might remember a couple years back, we talked about an action plan, and we talked about things that we could do to help maybe close that gap a little bit and encourage families to choose Taunton. So when I looked really at all the data, I noticed that obviously I came here, I think I came into this position in 2018, and when I looked at 2018, 2019, we started to increase, and I do believe that it has a lot to do with the advertising that we did. We added a great link to our website. We increased our advertising. We had the brochures. Our intention was to invite school choice families to Parent University. We weren't able to do that for obvious reasons. In addition to offering the additional programs at Taunton High School, with sports, our CTE program, as you know, has increased. So these are some of the things that we want to continue to increase in our district, but also advertise and make families aware of all the things we have.
And continuing on the right side, we have gone ahead and invested in virtual learning opportunities way back really a few years ago, where you didn't see that many school districts doing that. Now you're seeing it a little bit more, but we've capitalized on that earlier. And that happens with maybe possibly students struggling, not ready to come into school with social anxiety and all. And going forward with, due to the pandemic with the SEL, social emotional, we may see students taking advantage of virtual school, which we use Edgenuity. We will continue to go ahead with our marketing approach using all platforms of social media to share what Taunton is all about, why you should send your child here to Taunton, choose Taunton. Meeting with families, both homeschool and school choice. Mrs. Perry has been doing that in the past few years, and will continue to do that. As she talks to families, she will go ahead and say to parents why they should be choosing Taunton, and they have been coming from homeschool and coming back to school into Taunton. One of the things that Mrs. Perry did say earlier in the presentation was she said that a lot of this data that you see is really fixed. You only report it once a year through DESE. So in the meantime, we could have added more students. So what she has suggested is possibly keeping a chart internally of additional school choice students, and then presenting it to the school committee later on, and instead of just doing that once a year and just saying where we are with school choice. And again, we're hoping to present that out or report those figures out in February with the progress on how we're doing with school choice and updates that we have.
And just to clarify, I do keep track every single time. So I have all of that data. It's just we don't present it. We have the October 1st numbers, you get the enrollment, but as I said, it's not real time, and I think it's really important for you to know as a committee, and I think as community members, what our school choice really looks like. So I am planning to provide that to you, and I could do it beforehand, or we could, in February, I could show you the pattern of the students that we've been receiving or sending.
Thank you, Kathy and Brenda. I think this is the report is great. The information gets more in-depth every time. I think the importance of this is that it's a complicated issue. Why is it a complicated issue? Because families, parents, as myself as a parent, and 12 years I've sat here, this is a very family-oriented issue. Where am I going to send my child? I think there's a certain percentage of it that may or may not be pluses or minuses of a district. Mm-hmm. But certainly by telling the pluses that we have, and I think there's a lot of them, especially at the high school, I think that you've done a great job at that, and that you're increasing and finally tweak it and finding those ways to advertise that. But really, if you look at the history of the delta between going in and going out, it's around 40-ish, a little over that. Last year with COVID was a real, an oddball number. I'm gonna turn it, Mr. Martin, I know has a question, and then I'm gonna go to Fiore, and then DeMello.
Excellent presentation. I just have two comments to make. Back in 1996, I was here, and we voted, the school committee at that time voted to be school choice community. We were the only school choice community in the area. Now, we don't have a boundary that does not offer school choice. So I think that's part of our problem, if you want to call it a problem. And I think the only way to alleviate that is what you're doing on the right-hand column, communication. And the other thing that I noticed back when I was in Brenda's position was people would move to Taunton and they wouldn't tell us that they came from Brockton, Randolph, Boston, whatever, because they were afraid they wouldn't be allowed to go to school here. And it's like, wait a minute, of course you can go to school here. As a matter of fact, we want you to go to school here, and we want you to register on a school choice. They thought there was something mysterious about this school choice if I register for it. And so back in those days, and I don't know if they still exist, people try to slide by for whatever reason that they have to just, go to the Taunton schools, but not live in Taunton. And I know that at the time, Mr. Cleary, Dr. Croto, John, you were a principal. I'm sure you were told more than once, have your teachers check these kids. Ask them, if they get a new student in class, where did you come from, So I think that's part of it too. So I think between the fact that everybody around us offers school choice, along with the reasons you gave, close to work, smaller community, and I'll be honest, I think athletics has something to do with it too. There's only so many starting players for certain teams, and if I'm not starting, but I am good, then I'm going to go to a community where I can start. And I think that happens too. So there's a lot of reasons that didn't exist in 1996 that exist today. Thank you.
Thank you. One, before I give it to Mr. Fiore, just so in case anybody's watching, school choice, that term, if we were not in school choice, we still could send the money out. They could go where they want and we would pay, but we wouldn't get any money coming back in. So the key thing for us being in school choice is for us receiving students. Because if I wanted to send my kids to Berkeley, the money goes to Berkeley. And we wouldn't get anything in return from we couldn't receive any students. So I just wanted to make that clear. Mr. Fiore, then Mr. DeMello.
Thank you. Well, remarks I wanted to make really follow up on what Mr. Martin was saying, that I know that the reversal of in and out came about when all of a sudden several of the systems adjoining us went to school choice, and again, for all the different reasons like work or friends or whatever, that we started seeing exercise of that. But on the other hand, what Mr. Martin was saying about athletics, and we'll also say about some other programs too, like our culinary arts program, our theater program, the money we've invested in the theaters, particularly at Taunton, Hyde, Friedman, and Martin. Kids may be attracted by different programs, and we need to spruce up our programs. Yes, maybe in the athletics, kids may want to go where they have a better chance of starting, but some of them may also want to go where there's a better facility. I mean, we put up a new baseball field and we won the championship. I mean, that says something. And I mean, in the very long career I've had in politics, both the city council and the school committee, I've been very big on facilities. And that's a big reason why. I want to be able to keep and attract the kids that we we have. And again, I think, if somebody wants to star in Beauty and the Beast, they may want to go to a smaller school. If they want a better production of The Sound of Music, they may want to come here. Let me say, I saw a production of The Sound of Music at one of the smaller high schools near us, and I saw one here at Taunton many years ago, and I can tell you it was night and day. And so we need to promote the programs that we have good facilities for, good faculty for, good coaches for. And we also need to understand that some kids who have talent, but maybe not as much talent as some of the others, may want to go somewhere where they're a bigger fish in a smaller pond.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. Mr. DeMello, then Ms. Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman Souza. Thank you, Mrs. Perry and Mrs. Monahan, for the presentation. Mr. Souza already answered one of my questions, and that is the effect if we were not part of school choice, that we would lose the incoming students, but still our outgoing students are definitely still outgoing. The one question I have is, in the 218 students, that is the 21 number, the outgoing students, are the charter school students included in that number, the 78, or is the 78 above and beyond the 218?
I'm sorry, what slide, Mr. DeMello?
So the Taunton School Choice Enrollment, the DESE slide,
Okay,
that has the bar graphs,
yes.
the 2021, the 218 sending, does that number include the 78 charter school students that appear in the charter school slide?
Yes. I believe it does, Mr. DeMello. The 28, you're talking about 2018?
No. So the DESE school choice enrollment numbers, right? Mm-hmm. The bar graphs, the blue and the oranges. Mm-hmm. So the very last slide, the 2021, has 117 in blue, which is receiving, mm-hmm. 218 sending. Mm-hmm. So of that 218, are the 78 charter school students for the same FY21 included in the 218?
78 and 218. So basically, so I can understand what you're asking, Mr. DeMello, and I'm looking at transferring over to the attending in FY21, the charter school is the 21. FY21 is the 78. That's the one you're
Yes,
mentioning.
is the 78.
And then you're looking at the bar graph of the 100 and the sending of 218. Does the 218 students include the 78 of charter? So the 78 minus the 218 should include, that will be, what happens is school choice doesn't cover both sending to either a district or a charter
So
school.
the 218 includes the
Does
78?
include, yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, and I think that was it, but to Mr. Fiore's point, if we built a brand-new softball field, we would always be state champions.
We are anyway.
Time to get on
Good
that.
point.
Thank you.
We better, I think we need to get that in the pipeline, back in the pipeline. We'll talk about that very shortly. Before Ms. Doherty and Mr. Cabral, did you have something?
Mrs. Doherty,
Ms. Doherty, at the end, I'm sorry. Ms. Doherty.
Excuse me, thank you, Mr. Souza, Mr. Cabral. So, one of the things that is really important, and I think that it just needs to be emphasized in the exit interviews and in the intro interviews, knowing why people are choosing the Taunton Public Schools, that has to do with programs and academic, athletic programs and athletic programs and academic programs that we offer if they're coming here because there is a better choice for learning and activity. And if they're leaving here because they are disenchanted with the district in those categories, we can't control grandma lives in the next town, or I love Norton, or any of that kind of thing. Because if there is a pattern that begins to develop around the questions of being disenchanted with the district, then of course that would be instructive for us in terms of looking at those programs and the reason why that's happening. So I wanted to say that, and I want to get back to, I know Mr. Souza, although I didn't quite hear you clearly, reference the income and outgo under school choice, and I think Mr. DeMello referenced it as well. So is the correct terminology for school choice that we're looking at here tuition? So when children come into the district, we count them in, it's a question, do we count them in our enrollment, thereby getting the Chapter 70 money per pupil that we get from the state? And in the students that are leaving us, we're not much, unlike the charter schools where we put a check in their backpack and let them go off to the charter school. We don't do that with school choice. We lose the revenue, as has been pointed out, but because they are now counted in somebody else's enrollment. So is tuition, is that a kind of misleading? It's like there is an exchange of money, but there really isn't an exchange of money.
Correct.
Or is
Well, you're there, yes. So what happens is that the Chapter 70 enrollment figures is only pretty much the schools that are coming, are our students, the Taunton Public School students. And then what will happen is, depending upon who chooses Taunton, that will happen would be a tuition amount would be paid by the sending district. So you get your Chapter 70 amount for the student. In addition, then you get the school choice tuition payment that will go with it, with the student. I can show you some things that I had in a chart before that would be very helpful.
Yes, thank you, because this has come up previously, a couple of years ago, and it just needs to be clarified. So yes, we can do that offline. Thank you, Mrs. Moynihan. Thank you, Mr. Souza.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. Mrs. Almeida?
Thank you. Okay, so did I hear you say that the sending students, or the sending out of the district, the charter school students are included in that? Then how come Boston isn't on here at all? And we've got a couple of kids that are going to charter schools in Boston. And then also New Heights in Brockton is 40 students, and we're saying 5. So are you sure that they're included?
Well, when I did the quick math, if you look at the quick map there, and I looked at, and I should have marked these here, slide 1, 2.
Or am I not reading this right?
Slide 3, we have 218 students being sent out. So if you take that 218 students and you see that we are sending on the enrollment chart there, 145 students in school choice, then you are right, then you got the 73 additional to charter. So if you are, you could be correct there that it's not attached to it, so school choice would not be in addition to charter, it would be in addition to charter. So I did a quick math and you are correct.
Okay.
I was trying to get Mr. DeMello offline, but you got me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Almeida. Mr. DeMello?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, so now I'm confused. So it's 218 plus the 78?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll confirm it back to you.
Yeah,
as well,
let's
just to
do
make
that.
sure- Yeah,
Yeah, let's do
so
that.
instead of going back and forth, why don't we just go ahead and look at our numbers and confirm to make sure it
Yeah.
provides you the correct information.
And if you
Yeah.
could also, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Attach a dollar value to it, because I do like the FY '20 receiving sending tuition charts, but that's FY '20. So as we can see, there's a negative $417,000 because we're school choice and we're losing more than we're gaining. So if we could compile the dollars attached to the charter schools, so we can see what that dollar value is, if it's not a lot of work. If it's
Yeah.
not a lot of work.
I think that, so it's really just two things, would be to compile that information, like Mr. DeMello said, add the charters and make sure we clearly understand the charter in the public schools, I guess is the way to put it. And then also, the information that Ms. Doherty was questioning was, if you could put it in layman's terms, or really in English, not educanese, that if a student goes, money does not go, or if we get receiving a student, then how do we receive it? How do we receive the money? So really, just where does the pool of money go? And is there one pool of money or two pools for the student, local pool,
Yeah.
if we could have that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Good.
if I may.
Mr. DeMello,
I mean,
go ahead.
We know the charter schools, we can't prevent that at all. We can minimize our financial deficiency on the school choice by doing like the Assistant Superintendent and Mrs. Perry showed us, networking and promoting. But charters, we can't, there's nothing we can do to recoup that. So that's my main reason. How much should we, how much should we invest to close that gap?
How much time do we want to spend to close the gap?
Well, yeah, spend, but,
And
invest.
money
I think
you
it's
wanna
invest
invest.
because we need to do some investment besides
Yeah.
just time, literature, whatever it may, billboards maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know. If it makes sense, we do it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMello. Mrs. Almeida?
Okay, if I remember correctly, if I recall, my memory's getting a little old, so sometimes I don't remember everything. But when you have a charter school, the first year of the charter school is X amount of dollars. Then the next year it goes up a little more, the third year it goes up, and then it caps off. Is it still the same way?
It is now a 6-year, it's actually a 6-year for charter reimbursement.
Now it went to 6?
Correct. In 2011, I believe that's what I had stated, was in 2011. Yes, 2011. What happens is it's based off the prior year increase. It starts off 100%, and then it's 25% of the next 5 years. And then you receive no more reimbursement unless there is another shift.
So have any of these schools, are we in that category where it's capped off?
I'd have to look at that with Mrs. Perry to see where we are with the number of enrollment numbers, so that could be something
Because
that'd
they
be very.
fluctuate.
Correct.
And because they
that's-
fluctuate, it's kind of hard sometimes to kind of figure where we're at.
Absolutely.
And they may graduate out,
Right.
so it's not
So
like
then
they're
it
leaving
doesn't
for any
count.
other reason other than the fact that they've done 12 years.
Right.
So.
So we need to figure out.
That's why we try to do the projected FY '22, so we
So
take our.
it's not
our
really
students now.
ever
No,
a
it
totally accurate figure because you don't know where they're lying in that. Okay, so it hasn't changed, it just gradually gets, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Almeida. Thank you, Mrs. Perry and Mrs. Moynihan. Appreciate it. And we're going to close with the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. So I seem to recall, I think I'm having a deja vu moment. I seem to recall the last time we did this presentation, shortly after a communication was sent to the school board clarifying a lot of the questions that were raised. So we'll do our research and we'll dig up that memo and we'll circulate it to the school board, clarifying a lot of the answers regarding costs, funding, where the dollars go and who the dollars follow. We'll also pull our charter school data. You remember there was a communication I sent out a couple years ago in response to a charter school proposal in Taunton Public Schools, which stated opposition as to why a charter school was not needed in the Taunton Public Schools, where I also provided some background information regarding the reimbursement question. I think Mrs. Doherty and Mrs. Almeida are asking how it gets funded in the reimbursement increment. So we'll make sure that we dig that up. The other piece I wanted to mention, and I think we've talked about in the past, but I wanted to bring it to the attention or remind the school committee, is that in the case of Somerset Berkeley, they created a preschool program, and a lot of parents chose to put their child in the preschool program. After preschool comes kindergarten, and a lot of families chose to keep those kids or keep that group or that cluster of kids together as they started kindergarten. So that's one of the reasons why we see the numbers as high as they are in Somerset Berkeley. And our neighbor to the north of us, they are very aggressive when it comes to advertising school choice. If you go on their website today, it does jump out that they are very aggressive in recruiting or soliciting school choice. And the reason is really simple: money. A lot of small suburban communities receive $25 per student in their Chapter 70 increase. So a school system, for example, with 2,400 students, $25, that's a $60,000 Chapter 70 increase. I'll say that again. A school system with 2,400 students, Chapter 70 increase of $25, their Chapter 70 increase is $60,000. If they recruit 12 school choice kids, $60,000. So now you begin to understand why smaller communities surrounding us who do not receive the Chapter 70 increases in the amount that urban districts do are very, very strong in advertising and putting out there that they are school choice districts. It comes down to money. And again, I don't fault them for what they're doing, because if we were getting $25 per kid, I would be doing or advocating that we'd be doing the same thing. So it really comes down to funding, because with $60,000, you can hire a teacher. In a small community, like those that surround us, that makes a big difference when it comes to class sizes. So that was just some information that I wanted to, again, remind the committee. It comes down to generating revenue, and it also, and factor in how they can generate additional revenue when Chapter 70 doesn't provide a lot of the smaller communities with the resources they need. And two, choice. When parents go to a preschool program, they make friends, not only with the children, but also with the adults, and they want to keep that group together on track. But we'll dig up that other information, and we'll put it out there before the next school committee meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Moving on to item F, the superintendent's report.
I'm up again.
Excuse
So-
me, E, the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chairman Souza. So I'm not going to read my report verbatim, but I just cannot express how proud I am of the state champion softball team, which we were able to honor today with a barbecue luncheon. So I thought it was only be appropriate that we would provide our champion softball team and our state champion javelin thrower with award-winning or champion barbecue from Kinfolk. So I want to thank Kinfolk for making the donation and providing us with the dinner that we provided our softball team. And what can we say about our softball team? Our softball team went on a run that may be a generational run. So Coach Consalvi and her coaches and the squad, not only were they excellent ambassadors on the field, they were excellent Taunton ambassadors off the field. So I'm attending a superintendent's conference right now in Falmouth, and Taunton Public Schools is the buzz among superintendents, with a state championship softball team, 2 and 3 years, a state champion javelin thrower, and let's not forget our baseball team. So 4 state championships in 3 years. I was joking with Superintendent Thomas, saying that we're going after Brockton's title as a city of champions. He chuckled, but I was serious, and I can't, again, say how proud I am of our students, our community, and looking back, I wish I had attended more games, because there was something special about attending those games and seeing the entire Taunton community there, cheering for our kids with one common goal, and celebrating the great things taking place in Taunton and the great things that are taking place in our school system. So again, very, very proud of our state championship softball team, as well as our state champion javelin thrower. We will have everyone back in November to fully recognize them before the school committee. One of my goals and one of my charges from the school board was to make sure that Taunton was a player locally, statewide, and nationally. So part of the work to make sure that Taunton has exposure on a national level, we sent our executive director of human resources to a conference in Denver representing the Taunton Public Schools at the American Association for School Personnel Administrators National Conference. So not only did Dr. Cheryl Butts attend, she also presented the great work that is taking place in our Human Resource Office. So I'm grateful to Cheryl for going to the conference and highlighting the work that we are doing, especially the work we are doing to try to diversify our workforce. As someone who, I know you're tired of hearing me say this, but as someone who was an immigrant to this country, I can speak firsthand on the importance of having a Portuguese-speaking teacher in front of me when I was a student, and the impact that it had on me, knowing that if that teacher, that educated professional, could achieve or attain an education that provided them with an opportunity to teach kids at that level, then I knew that was something that I could do as well. So Dr. Butts sharing our work that is taking place here in Taunton on a national level is something that I'm very proud of, and something that I will highlight when I complete my self-evaluation. Also wanted to talk about our summer school program. We're using our ESSER dollars the way they were meant to be used. So we are offering summer school programs at all of our schools. We are also offering some programs via extended day. We are running special education extended school year programs. We are running speed and strength and conditioning programs, a book club, as well as a theater workshop. So the Taunton Public Schools has a robust summer school program that is taking place right now that will go on throughout the summer. And I also wanted to highlight that we have over 350 students enrolled in programs. We're trying to keep the class sizes down to 10 to 14 students. They are 4-hour programs of learning. Elementary students are receiving one-on-one instruction in literacy, math, science, and social studies. And themes for these connectors include action, around the world, and under the sea. Be sure to follow our social media website, Twitter, Facebook outlets, as we are highlighting the great work taking place in our schools throughout the summer. So with that, that concludes my superintendent's report.
Questions of the superintendent? I saw Ms. Doherty, then Mrs. DeMello.
Yes, thank you very much. We certainly have a robust and exciting summer program for our kids. I'm sorry, I missed the numbers of students.
We have over 350 students enrolled in the elementary school classes. I do not have the middle school and high school numbers because this was written before the program started, but I can have Mrs. Perry pull those numbers and update you.
So 350 plus some substantial other
plus.
numbers, so
Right.
that's really wonderful. So I do want to point out, in the interest of our good relationships with community organizations, that I understand that the Y has a program ongoing at the Parker Middle School, so they're locating their summer program there. Is that, oh, Mrs. Perry's not there.
Yeah, so I will also provide you, I do plan to provide you an update in August regarding the additional programs we have running in our school system. So we are working with, I believe, True Diversity. They are running a summer program and using our facilities. The YMCA is using our facilities. And moving forward, something that I wish Mrs. Perry was here to take credit for. She has worked very closely with the agencies in our community, and that is something that I wish to continue to have in place in our schools, or at specific schools, maybe strategically placing them depending on location. Because I want to make sure that all our students, whether it's through the Taunton Public Schools or whether it's through agencies that operate here in Taunton, that they have choice, they have opportunity to put their child, whether it's a enrichment program or whether it's an academic-based type program, that they have choice to put their child in a program that best fits the student's need as well as the family needs.
And yes, I'd like to see, to your point, those, that relationship, that collaboration. So we've got our own before and after school program. There's Girls Inc., there's the Y, and there's also the Boys and Girls Club, and we have some 8,500 plus children. And to your point, providing our families and children with an opportunity to choose from a menu of programs. There are certainly enough children in the community to go around to make that a very robust program for them throughout the entire school year. So thank you very much for that sort of innovative approach that you're taking to community interrelation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. Anytime you get to choose from a menu is a good thing. Mrs. DeMello.
Especially the breakfast menu, Mr. Souza.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to be very clear that out in the community we hear there's a lot of learning loss, a lot of gaps because of the situation we just encountered with COVID-19 pandemic. I love that our school buildings are being occupied and used to its full capacity, but 350 students, or slightly more than that, based on 8,000 students in the district seems like a very, very small number. My only question and concern is there any student that needs help that's being shut out? I mean, do we have capacity to assist any student that may have lost any learning gaps or learning loss during the pandemic that has asked for assistance that we're not able to accommodate?
If there are families that require assistance, I would ask them to contact their child's school. If they're unsuccessful in contacting their child's school, please contact the superintendent's office, specifically Mrs. Perry, because she oversees student services. I know when we put the lists together to identify students, and I think one of our school committee meetings back in either May or June, we did talk about this topic, and I did mention to families to please contact the child's school, because I want to make sure that families that need either enrichment support or academic support, that we provide them with the services that they need. This is the time to do it. And part of the work that I'm doing at the MASS conference this week is also about accelerated learning. So again, to close those gaps as well. So this is why we have the funding, to put programs in place to provide students and families with the help and the support that they need.
And that's exactly my point, Mr. Superintendent, because we do have the funding, we do have the staff, and September's around the corner. So if these kids are getting back in the classroom and they're behind, then, we're going to hear the excuses that we didn't have the capacity to help them. So I just want everybody to understand, the public at home, that we do have the capacity, we do have the resources, financial and staff, to accommodate these children that need the extra support. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, and once September rolls around, we'll be working with our principals to provide them with funding to run after-school programs. I'm thinking in-person, virtual, after-school programs, weekend programs, vacation school programs, before-school programs. Again, as I've stated to this school committee, I do not want to be reactive the way we were for the last 16 months. I want us to be proactive in looking at how we can be creative, how we can respect what we've done in the past, or how we can look towards the future and take advantage of the lessons that we learned to make sure our kids and our families have everything that they need.
Excellent.
Okay, Mr. Martin and then Ms. Doherty.
I agree with Mr. DeMello. No one should go without anything at this point in time. Money's not an issue. And the reason I put my hand up actually was, I met a parent from another district, not too far from here, who had has two children. One's in the 5th grade, I believe, one's in the 2nd grade. And the 5th grader did fine remotely, you know, in hybrid, so forth. The 2nd grader needs help. I said, well, what is the school system doing? She goes, I haven't heard. They're not doing anything. I says, you gotta be kidding me. They got money. We all got money to do these programs, to bring these kids back. So, you know, kudos to us that we are doing everything we can with the money we have. And, you know, I just pointed her in the direction of call your superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Ms. Doherty.
Just a footnote, I had come across my desk an announcement from the Department of Education about a Summer Acceleration Academy grant, and I know that you're aware of that. We were awarded $206,500 for something called Summer Acceleration Academy Grant. So I'm wondering if this is the money that we have been talking about right along as the money from the department to support summer programs, or is this a different pot of money in addition to that other pot of money that was available? We have so much money flying around, it's hard to keep track of.
We'll never have enough money, Mrs. Doherty. So that funding that you were referencing is additional funding that we are receiving that Mr. Byron assisted with writing summer school grants for the middle schools. I think it was for our 3 middle schools, in the total, in the sum of $206,000. And that is additional funding above and beyond the ESSER funding, which this school board had allocated towards summer school programs. So this, in theory, will free up ESSER dollars that we can utilize during the school year.
So it's, according to this document, week-long summer academic program says, so are we ready to do that?
The way our grant was written, we'll be able to embed that funding or the accelerated portion into our existing summer school programs.
Thank you. So that answers Mr. DeMello's question about more children being able to participate. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Souza.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. We're all set with the screen, right? Did you want to move back? We just have a little housekeeping issue here. On the superintendent's report, no other questions? What is the wishes of the committee on the report?
Motion to receive and place on file?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to F, Administrative Business Staffing Report.
Receive and place on file?
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. On to G, Subcommittee Reports. The Finance and Law Subcommittee met today on 7/14/21, and the chairman of that is Mr. Martin.
Finance and Law met earlier this afternoon or evening, and we had several things on the agenda today. We had student activities, which there weren't any. We had a recommendation from Karen Papa, the Food Service Director, to recommend a bid award to glasses. Let's see. That's what happens when I change seats. Let's see. I get it, I guess. It's right here. All right, to Cape Dairy LLC, doing business as White Brothers. They were the only bidder, but their price was reasonable and in comparison to past years, acceptable. So the committee voted for that. Karen Pepper also had a motion to, or a recommendation, I should say, for paper products for FY '22. And there were two bidders, WB Mason and Mansfield Paper, and WB Mason was low bid with a total of $666,813. And again, the subcommittee voted to award the bid to WB Mason for that amount of money. And we had a bid recommendation from Ms. Monahan regarding pest control, which is required in all our schools. And pest control was, Flynn Pest Control was the low bidder of several bids. We've had Flynn Pest Control in the past, and we've had a good experience with them, but they were the low bidder. So the Finance and Law Subcommittee voted to accept the recommendation of Ms. Monahan for the amount of $6,480 for that particular service. Also on the agenda was the use of facilities, which was received and placed on file. And then we had bills payable, two. FY '21 was $2,708,176.09. And we made that a separate motion from the other one, so that motion passed by the subcommittee. And we had a bills payable for FY '22 in the amount of $55,776.16. And once again, the motion passed by the Finance and Law Subcommittee. We had a facilities update. Cleaning is going on in the schools, even though they're being used for other purposes, but they're cleaning around them. The form for Galligan School has been submitted to SBA. I'm not sure what you call that form, but feasibility study.
It's a schematic design.
And schematic design, okay? For Galligan School, okay, for windows and roof and things like that. And the alternative high school windows, if you've noticed, they're boarded up. They're not going to stay boarded up. They're going to be windows there. I'm assuming that they're going to put the windows in all at once. And then we have a good news from Ms. Monahan, thanks to her staff and her, that we have the FY 20? FY '20 end-of-year report with no findings. And that's the report of the Finance and Law Subcommittee.
Wishes of the committee on the subcommittee report.
Motion to accept the report and adopt the recommendations.
Motion made to accept the report and adopt the recommendations. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Fiore. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Before I call the vote, Mr. DeMello has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we can just revert back to the pest control bid. I was here when the discussion was happening in the subcommittee, and Mr. Souza, you did bring up a good point at the discrepancy in the cost. I'm all for saving a lot of money. That's my forte. I love that. But when there's such a discrepancy, it's cause for concern. I know you've done the due diligence, Mrs. Monahan, but is there anything that's an outlier that is a difference? I mean, is it environmentally friendly products, or I don't know. I mean, that's my concern on that.
In the committee, in the subcommittee meeting, I had mentioned that going forward next year, I will be reviewing the request for proposals. When you only have so much in front of you, you only know what you know. So I feel that seeing other bids, they had put in things that I had not been used to seeing. So what I feel is going forward to next year, I will be revising the request for proposals where I will not be so vague in the request, where you'll have a lot more details of saying specifics, like spending time, the amount of time per site, not just a monthly visit. So there are things that we didn't have in the past that I now see that we will have. Again, Flint Pest Control has done a great job. They come in whenever we need them, and so that's not the issue. But again, I will be looking at that for next year.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I do have some questions on the warrant. I did reach out to Superintendent Cabral, and Mrs. Monahan did get back to me on some of the items that I had time to question, but I do have a couple of concerns. If we can go to page 12, the Go Box LLC, it says prior year, tech maintenance, other expenses. Does that revert to prior fiscal year? The 2000, it's on page 12, Mrs. Monahan.
No, it is not. What it does, it's just the way that we use a tech maintenance. So it is not prior year expenses. It's just how it does the software itself. So no, it is not part of the encumbrance. It's not part of last year's. It is just the way that it is specifically stated in the software.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may continue.
Yes.
On page 14, Haig, Sahadi and Company, what is that? What were their services provided?
End of the year report audit, where
That's
they
the
found
audit
us,
with
they
the
found us
findings.
with 0 findings.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
It was worth $3,750.
They sure were, thank you.
Thank you so much. And if I may continue, let's see, page 35, that was a big one. I apologize, I didn't get this to you prior to tonight's meeting, but the Wally Computer Associates, $396,368.50. I keep seeing these big numbers on technology. I thought we had overcome that with the purchases or the leasing that we've done, and these big numbers still keep coming up.
Well, some of the things that I have to say, as I spoke to, there's all these purchases, I'm always in consistent conversations with the Director of Technology, Carolyn Blano. There were a significant amount of Chromebooks that are end of life. So those end of life can't be used for testing or anything like that, so they have to be replaced. So that is one purchase that we are doing. Also, because of breakage, additional Chromebooks are needed. And it's not just Chromebooks, it's the licenses, and then additional teaching Chromebooks because of the ESSER funds, where we will be, we've posted additional positions. We're going to need Chromebooks for the staff. So that is all in line with what we are needing. It's nothing more. I mean, of course, we'll have a few extra just in case if we have additional students, but that is the reason why we had to purchase the numbers.
Okay, I was just concerned with the technology maintenance line item of $256,000. That was part of that $396,000, which your explanation is great, thank you. And the last thing, I respectfully ask to vote present on page 15, voucher number 16077 in the amount of $999.
I'll amend my motion to include that.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan, amends her motion. Wendy, did you get that number? Thank you. There's a motion, Mr. Pulaski.
I'd like to vote present on page 22, item 15057.
Did you get that, Wendy? Thank you. Mr. DeMello.
I'm sorry, just one last item. Again, during the subcommittee, Mr. Fiore mentioned about the Zoom purchases. Mr. Superintendent or Ms. Monahan, do we have a procurement card? Can we get a procurement card for the school system? Maybe the leadership team can all have one?
Actually, I believe the process would have to be approved by school committee, and then I believe it would have to be approved by the treasurer or the auditor's office. But if if this is something that the school committee wishes for us to pursue, I believe it's called a PEP card.
Yep.
That is something that we can pursue.
I think that, why don't we pursue the information so we can probably make it easier on the two people that have to put the money out.
Right, I mean,
So-
basically just a central office card in the name
Yeah.
of the superintendent that he is authorized to use, or you can designate a user.
Yeah.
And it could be used for stuff like this, because they are quite large, as Mr. Fiore pointed out.
Yeah.
And I think it's centralized. I think we reap the benefits of more cost control and not waiting for people to get reimbursed, especially when you're talking a couple of $1,000s.
If this is something that will be helpful to the administration, I think we should get the information, and then we can talk about it at a future meeting. Or at Finance and Law, and then.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. DeMello. So the motion made to accept the report and adopt the, Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. Just question, something that I've raised before in previous years, and as I look at the purchase of paper goods for lunch tray, utensils, forks, plates, straws, all disposable items. One is assuming first that they are compostable as well, and would be put into a recycling bin. But more importantly, or as equally importantly, I'm wondering if it, so we're looking at $666,000 plus that we would expend on these paper products. I don't know if it costs us anything to dispose of them as recycled items, but I wonder if it is possible to give some consideration to using one of our schools, perhaps our smaller schools, as a pilot project for actual china and non-throwawayable utensils to serve our children food. We are rapidly moving into and aggressively moving into what we would hope is a sustainable society. And part of our responsibility as educators is to educate our young people to saving as much of the planet as they possibly can. I know that there are school districts, schools in those school districts that have adopted like when I was in school, a washing machine and china plates, and over the long term, certainly a short-term investment, but a long-term savings, not only for our resources, but for the planet as well. So just kind of put that on your list of things to think about going forward over the next year or two. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Ms.
Souza.
Doherty. On the motion,
d-
Mrs. Fagan,
Well, just quickly, I neglected to add on
Nate's.
Nathan's also, his motion to
Did
be.
you get that, Wendy?
I know she got it, but I should have added it right after.
Nate,
Mr.
both for
Demello.
Nate and for Greg.
It's all
Okay.
amended to include both Mr. Pawlowski and Mr. Demello.
Thank you. The chair notes that as well as the recording secretary. Thank you. On the motion to adopt the accept the report and adopt the recommendation, and it has been seconded. On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to new business, 2021 District and School Accountability Reporting Update. There's an enclosure in the packet. Mr. Cabral.
So I want to thank Assistant Superintendent Christopher Barata for providing me with this very important update that I think is important for the school committee to be made aware of, and it's also important for the public to be made aware of. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education provided a request to the United States Department of Education. They requested a waiver from the federal accountability requirements for the 2020-2021 school year. Mr. Barata was pleased to learn that the Commonwealth was notified that the waiver had been granted and that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Board voted to approve a one-year amendment to the state's accountability regulations. So as a result, the states will not be assigning our district or our schools or any district or any school in the state of Massachusetts or throughout the Commonwealth with an accountability determination this fall. Excuse me, got a little tongue-tied there. Being the beneficiary of this waiver does not mean that as a district, that our work in examining student data and adjusting instructional practices will be paused for the upcoming year. Instead, we will be utilizing the data culled from this year's MCAS along with other internal assessment data to develop sustainable systems of support to accelerate our students' learning as we emerge from the pandemic. And as a matter of practice and transparency, we will be prepared to share this year's MCAS results with the school committee later this fall once the embargo has been lifted. So again, no accountability status for any school system or any school throughout the Commonwealth. We are not just going to sit on our hands and pretend that we're not going to get this data, because I think we all realize what the data is going to tell us, that there's going to be a lot of work to do regarding our students, and we will be prepared to provide you with a fully transparent presentation in the fall once the data has been released. So thank you, Mr. Barata.
Any questions of the committee? Thank you. Before I go on, I forgot to do this under the superintendent's report, and that is I would like the committee to send a letter of thank you to kinfolk. I know the superintendent probably is, but on behalf of the committee, thank you kinfolk for donating all the food tonight for the softball champions and the javelin champion for the coalition dinner tonight. If the committee could do that on a motion, I would
So
appreciate
moved.
it.
Second.
All those motion made and seconded to thank kinfolk for the donating the food in coalition tonight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to the next item, item number 2, Taunton Municipal Lighting Project, COVID Recovery Broadband is an enclosure. Superintendent Cabral.
I'll be real quick. I've been having ongoing conversations with Kenny Goulart, who I believe beginning next year, Mr. Martin, will no longer be serving. Sometime in the spring. So Kenny Goulart, who works very closely with the Taunton Public Schools, he has a very ambitious proposal to provide broadband service throughout the city of Taunton. So again, TMLP has been a great partner to the Taunton Public Schools, and now they are looking to provide broadband service to the entire community. Part of the proposal would also include broadband service to Berkeley, Rainham, and Dighton. Kenny has reached out to me asking for a letter of support. I have offered to support his ambitious program, and I would ask that the school committee go on record as supporting the broadband proposal that the TMLP will be providing, I believe, to the Bristol County Commission, I believe tomorrow. I have already reached out to the superintendents of Berkeley, Rainham, and Dighton, and all 3 superintendents are on board. And I don't need to remind this committee, we passed out over 2,000 hotspots last year. 2,000 hotspots because families did not have affordable or reliable Wi-Fi service. So not only would this be a benefit to the entire community, and as a resident of Taunton, I would be proud to say that I live in a municipality that can provide broadband service to the entire population, but more importantly to our students. Because now a Chromebook is no longer just a nice to have, it is required. And I consider a Chromebook to be the equivalent of a textbook. So I again, put my full weight, my full support behind this ambitious program. What the TMLP anticipates doing is going before the Bristol County Commission and asking for funding through their ARP funds to begin this project, and then from there they would bond the project, which would be of no cost to the TMLP, as it would be funded or the project would pay for itself. So I just wanted to share that great news. It's a great program for the city of Taunton, but more importantly, it'd be a great program for our kids.
I think this is the $10 million. I've read this, although I haven't talked to any of the commissioners, but I read the report, read these documents, and the $10 million they're going to request from the Bristol County Commissioners has to do with their startup, and then like the superintendent said, they're going to bond fund it. This is there's really not too many things we get involved in outside of schools. This is directly related to schools because it has to do with, we're not only a customer but a cooperative partner with the TMLP. So my recommendation to the committee would be to jump on this and send a letter of support to this community-based effort of potentially providing broadband throughout the community. And of course, as a little bit of a selfish thing is that it'll be available to all of us privately too as private citizens. So I think it's a monumental undertaking, but I think it's worthwhile for the community. Mrs. DeMello, do you have something to say on this?
Yes, well, actually, it's an inquiry. So I fully support this, but as a resident and taxpayer, I just want to make sure, and we have one of the commissioners here with us, we're lucky to have Mr. Martin with us. Is the ask for Bristol County government $10 million? Because I know they're receiving about $107 million total federal dollars. The reason I'm asking this is because if it's estimated to cost $40 million, and we're asking for 10 as a city or as an entity, TMLP, I just don't want to show a letter of support and it doesn't get to the conclusion that it needs to be, and now the taxpayers are on the hook for $30 million or $40 million. You know, as a school committee member, I don't want to show support for something that doesn't have legs. Thank you.
We are asking the school department for funds, the TMLP that is. We are asking the city of Taunton for funds. We are asking Berkeley for funds. We're asking Dighton Rehoboth for funds. We're asking Lakeville for funds. And we're asking the Bristol County Commission for funds. So this is not a Taunton project. This is a county project. Now, granted, the size of some of those communities are very small, but so isn't their territory. So, but we are asking, and we would use COVID money to do this, and it's allowable because it's bringing internet to community, especially students. So right now, we do service Dayton public buildings. We service Lakeville public buildings. We service Bridgewater Rainham public buildings. Who else? Did I forget somebody? Obviously, we
Dayton.
service Taunton public buildings.
Dayton.
Dayton, yeah, we service Dayton Rehoboth.
I should be a commissioner.
So it's a spread out. It's not just Taunton and the commission. And we're trying not to be greedy, so to speak.
I'll offer a limited,
So we should be greedy.
thank you, I'll offer a limited discussion on this only because we're probably gonna make a motion and we can discuss it then. Mr. Fiore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The thing is, this is not some fly-by-night operation. I mentioned I was on the other side of government for years, and I remember the TMLP coming forward and beginning to provide the internet services for the municipality and for the school system. They've been doing that for nearly 30 years. And they've gone through several managers of the TMLP and several project managers in developing this. Just by coincidence, I'm working on a totally unrelated project with Richard Velez, who was the original project manager back in the 1990s. This has been a well-conceived project, and we've had a good track record with the TMLP. There was a little bit of controversy over whether or not to add cable television to the mix. Actually, now it's not a controversy because we're going more towards streaming, so that will be part of this. But the broadband service that, or the internet services that the TMLP has been offering for years are becoming more and more popular, and I think it's a great investment.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. Mr. Martin and
Just one last comment. As a TMLP commissioner, one of the most, probably the most frequent call we get is, when are we going to get the internet? Because there are some people that do have access to it only because of where they live. And, how come he has it and I don't? So it's been an issue for a while.
I've been waiting for you to answer that question from me, anyway. Is there anyone want to make a motion, or would anyone like to support this? Would the committee like to support this? If not, we can just move on if the committee doesn't want to do it as a whole. No.
Well, I will. I move that we go on record as supporting the project. Again, we've been partners with the TMLP the TMLP itself for well over 100 years, but on this particular aspect, at least 30 years, and I think we should stand by it.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Pulaski. Thank you, Mr. Pulaski. On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Exactly. The next two items on the agenda were asked to be placed on here, and I'm going to let the superintendent handle number 3, voter registration drive at Taunton High.
So today, I received a communication from Pamela Manconi regarding discussion, a conversation that's been ongoing regarding a student voter registration drive at Taunton High School. So we received communication that the commission discussed the possibility of holding a voter registration session at the high schools, because we do have two, and voted to table the issue for more discussion before action is taken. The commission has expressed that they wanted to be thorough in any action taken to ensure impartiality and the ability to conduct the sessions in such a way that offered equal and fair opportunity to all students. So it sounds like this is something that will be discussed at a later date, and then once I have more information, I'll be sure to share it with the committee as well as with the high school staff.
Mrs. Almeida.
Thank you. We always, for years and years, had a registrar right at the high school in the guidance department. I don't know what year that stopped, that we don't have someone there. students could go anytime down to the guidance department and register to vote. What happened?
Nothing has changed. I would equate this very similar to kind of use your logic or your explanation, Mrs. Almeida. Any student in the high school can go down and see their guidance counselor and work on an application to attend the college. So students know they have access to that. But what we've done in the past that has been very successful with the neighboring universities and the local junior colleges is we have brought universities or colleges into the schools. They have set up tables, they have set up booths, and provided information and offered support on how to register for the college, how to complete the application. So I see this as an extension of the registrar. It's one person, 2,700 students. So in order to provide more information, in order to provide more adequate information on a timely manner, we're going to try to partner with the registrar's office to support getting this information out to a wider group of students versus students individually going down or students missing an announcement, not getting the flyer, not seeing the link on the internet. We'll have people, boots on the ground, to work with our kids to get them registered.
But there's only a limited age group of students that can register to vote.
So we may have juniors and seniors, which would be, at our high school, you're probably talking close to 1,000 kids.
Yeah. So all you need is an announcement to say that we have someone in the building, and you can drop by anytime between the hours of blah, blah, and register to vote. I don't understand what the big deal is. We've always had it at the high school, and we've always notified the students that they could do that.
Yeah, at Taunton High, I don't believe we've done this at the alternative high school, so I'd have to speak with Principal Delaney. And again, my position would be to provide more access for our students. The registrar doesn't just deal with voter registration. The registrar wears multiple hats and has multiple tasks that take up a lot of her time during the school day. For example, permits. I get emails from families and kids asking how to get a worker's permit. So in addition to helping with voter registration, moving student files, receiving student files, and now also helping students to vote, we can work with our city to provide kids more opportunity. So again, and I know you're tired of hearing me say this, access and opportunity. How do we provide the kids at Taunton High School with access and opportunity above and beyond what they already have?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a good step for us.
Okay, but I'm and I've always been, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. So if you tell them about it and they don't do it, it's their problem. That's my opinion.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Mr. Souza. So I had asked that this item be placed on the agenda. And I fully appreciate that there may have always been access through the guidance counselors for anybody who wanted to register to vote, but that's different. And I'm not going to repeat what the superintendent has said, but indeed support what he has said, that the visibility of a day or a couple of days during the year where there is more visibility in an attempt to encourage young people to register to vote, where they can see somebody from the city hall and understand that we feel very keenly that it is an extremely important right that they have as first-time voters to register to vote, if we're providing them that access. And then the ongoing support by the guidance counselor, or whoever else is responsible for doing that on an ongoing basis would be there as well. But I think that again, to the superintendent's point, it needs to be visible. It needs to be a celebration if they are voting for the first time. So I would support whatever the registrar decides. Clearly, they're the ones who are going to be doing this. I support that wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. I have Mrs. DeMello, then Mr. Fiore, then Mrs. Fagan. Mrs. DeMello.
Mr. Chairman, is a motion in order for this? Do we need a motion, or is this just informational?
This is informational. I would discourage a motion
Very well.
because I think that it sets a bad precedent that it's being pushed by this body. I think that we should leave it to the city hall, to the people at city hall to work directly with the high school. We don't want any parent to think that it's any political motivation
Right.
or anything along that lines. So
Right.
I think the best thing to do is have the administration work with the the new election, what do they call it, a registrar of elections or whatever? her
Excuse me,
name is?
Mr. Chairman, that's not what I heard from the superintendent. I thought this was a high school lead-in. This was nothing to do with City Hall, am I correct?
No. Well, yes, but the ladies from City Hall that he read the letter from, that's why I mentioned that.
Okay, so now I'm confused. So,
Okay.
we want to hold a voter registration drive at Taunton High School. We have the staff, we have the resources in place, but yet we need folks from City Hall to come and conduct this drive?
We have one person at Taunton High School who does this work in addition to other work. And the thought process was to work with our city to bring the registration process to the high school, where students could register to vote in addition to having access to the registrar, and to really use it as a civic lesson.
Right.
Something that could be discussed in the social studies department, something that could be announced, similar to when we bring Bridgewater State in, or when we bring UMass Dartmouth in, and students can get information on the universities, or BCC, Massasoit. We just want to make sure that students understand that when they're 18, it's their right, it's their obligation to register to vote. And if we can provide them with the access at school, I think it makes sense, because we always hear about students not having the ability to drive, or they have issues with work, they have issues with childcare. So here's an opportunity for Taunton Public Schools, the high school, with their new interim principal, to work with our City Hall to make sure that students who are able to vote, of age to vote, have access and opportunity.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think the issue with students registering to vote and actually going to City Hall, that's where the intimidation comes in, is actually City Hall, quote unquote. I think that having the in-house resources that we have relieves that pressure of registering to vote. And you said it clearly, we don't want to make this political. And if we're not going to make this political, then we don't need outside folks, even though there are folks, coming into the high school, if we have the resources there. So this drive, is it a one-day event? Is it a weekly event? Is it a monthly event? I mean, we need to define this, because right now I am very confused on what we're trying to arrive at.
I think that we should let this up to the administration there's no problem, I think there's no problem, we shouldn't solve it here. I don't want parents to say that a student was coerced into signing one thing or another, or, oh, are you a this party, are you that party, are you independent? I think that it's best to be left by the City Hall and the administration, and let them work out the details. And you're right, is it gonna be once a year, is it gonna be ongoing? How does that work? So, that's just, but my opinion as the chair. I do have a couple more people that want to speak. If we can go around, and then I'll come back on that. I have Mr. Fiore, Mrs. Fagan, and Mrs. Almeida.
I'm Mrs. Doherty.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You were on the initial run, so I'll put you
I've already spoken, so
on the second
I'll
round.
wait my turn. Thank
On the
you.
second round. Thank you. Mr. Fiore, then Mrs. Fagan, then Mrs. Almeida, then Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to solve a lot of some of our nation's worst problems right now. We're having this huge national debate over ballot security versus voter suppression. If we're doing registration and education in connection with registration in the schools, the biggest issues in those areas I just spoke about are elements of citizenship and elements of residency. And helping kids through the registration process helps determine their eligibility, helps determine where they're placed, and if there's anything that needs to be done to make some corrections with how their residency is established or how their citizenship is this is a great opportunity to correct it before it becomes a political issue. And I really like the opportunity. I should also mention, when I was in college in Maine, they had a system, I think they probably still do, where any justice of the peace can conduct voter registration. I was involved in College Republicans up there, and when I wanted to vote absentee here in Taunton, in those days I had to have my ballot notarized, and I used to be able to go to people that I was involved in those things with because they had that power, and they got those powers because they wanted to work on voter registration. It'd be nice if maybe, since we've got our representative here, I think we ought to be considering reforms like that in Massachusetts where it becomes more of an extension, that we don't have to just go to a scary office in City Hall, where there may be more personal ways of conducting registration. And I think that system they had in Maine was wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. Mrs. Fagan.
I would just like to bring up, because nobody's talking about it, by the way, for all boys that are registering to vote, they're supposed to sign up for selective service when they're 18 years old. That's still on the books, selective service, and we don't even talk about that. You're aware of that, right, Mr. Cabral? Yep, so I made all my boys do it, because I knew it was something you had to do. Now, I know the post office used to have those cards. They didn't have ones the last time I looked, but they also say you can go online and do it. Somebody ought to tell the kids about that too, because sometimes on the college applications, they ask you if you signed up for selective service also.
Yeah, it has to be done.
It has to be done. Yeah, I mean, but as far as registering to vote, I remember asking my mother to borrow the car the day I turned 18. I went down to the town hall in Somerset, registered to vote. I never voted in my hometown. The only place I've ever voted is in Taunton, so. But it meant enough to me. But I don't know. I think sometimes this got to be some personal responsibility too. You know, you can go down and pick up cards for your kids down at City Hall. You just go down and get them. They give them to you, and you bring them back all filled out. And you don't. It's not a scary experience. You get the nicest people in the world working down there. So I don't think it's any big deal. But the selective service thing is something we have to let the young men know.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. Mrs. Almeida?
I haven't seen a high school handbook in a while, but I remember once upon a time in the high school handbook, it had, you can register to vote at such and such an office at the high school. So I agree that it's not our responsibility to make sure the kids register to vote, but I think we should make them aware that there is a place that they can go to. So, and I don't think this is the year to do it. But if it's in the handbook the way it was before, then they sign off in the handbook, so they should know that there was a place to go.
And now that I think about it,
Thank you.
now that I think about it, I
I'm
think they
sorry?
can do it. I said, now that I think about it, they can do it online. Just go right in the computer.
Right,
Yeah.
and
So
it's
that's
in the
another
handbook.
act.
It was in the handbook once
Yeah,
upon a time, so
that's
I
right.
don't know.
No, that's great. Ms. Doherty?
Yes, however a voter registration drive takes place, I think that it's really important to expose our youth to the very benefit of a democratic society, and that is the right to vote. And to Mr. Cabral's point, to provide them with access to the extent that we can, then we ought to. I don't agree that it would appear political. We as individuals aren't going to go to the high school and stand around and register those young people to vote. Somebody else is going to do that. If in fact it turns out that way, the registrar of voters would celebrate that opportunity in our high schools. So we shouldn't obviously make it any more complex than we need to be. We are the educational leaders of the community. We are bound to teach civic education, and the law passed 3 or 4 years ago that there should be a civic education project that comes out of our high school for every youngster or group of youngsters. I don't know if that's happening or it isn't, but it is our civic responsibility as educational leaders to provide every opportunity in every way for every aspect of the lives of these young people that we possibly can, and providing them with an opportunity on site. You know, as to Mr. DeMello's point, the City Hall is open, the young people, we could put them on a bus and take them to City Hall if we wanted to. Having City Hall come to them, I believe, if they decide to do that, and we decide to do that, shows a great deal of respect for the voting process and for our young people in that activity. So if we're certainly not going to take a vote on this. We should wait to see what the registrar's office says and then move forward if we choose to, but I would recommend that we put it on our action items list so that it doesn't slip through the cracks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. To Mrs. Doherty's point, which registrar's voters office? Which registrar's voters office are you referring to in your comment? Which registrar of voters office are you referring to? You just, our registrars.
City of Taunton.
Okay.
Mr. Cabral, the memo that Mr. Cabral read is from.
We have one,
I
don't we?
think Mr. DeMello is referencing the school registrar or the registrar of voters at City Hall. I think Mrs. Doherty, not to speak for Mrs. Doherty, she can speak for herself. I believe we are talking about the registrar of voters from City Hall, waiting for a response from them.
I think that whoever does it, whoever the responsible person at the high school, the administration will find the responsible person at the high school to work with the City Hall person to get the civic lesson accomplished. I guess it's the easiest way to put it. Next item on the agenda is the high school student serving as a non-voting member of the school committee. Mr. Cabral.
So I believe prior to tonight's meeting, I wasn't aware that the law had changed or the requirement had changed. So you should have on your table the Chapter 71, Section 38M, which was revised effective February 6, 2019. So it states, and I apologize for reading, because I know some of you probably haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's regarding the student advisory committees, which Mrs. Almeida has met with regularly.
They have to vote by June 1st, and they do that every year. It's
So-
not something new, Mr. Cabral.
Yeah, I'm just not sure where we are as far as the process where we have the transition at the high school. So I wanted to make sure that you have the regulation in front of you. You see that we've highlighted a section where members of such student advisory committees shall, by majority vote prior to the first day of June of each year, elect from their number a chairperson who shall serve for a term of 1 year. And the said chairperson shall be an ex officio, non-voting member of the school committee without the right to attend executive sessions unless such right is expressly granted by the individual school committee. Said chairperson shall be subject to all school committee rules and regulations and shall serve without compensation. So I will work with interim principal Holcomb to make sure that we have an advisory committee put together, because again, I'm not sure where we left off with this prior to the end of the school year, and also make interim principal Holcomb aware to let the student know that they will be an ex officio member of the school committee.
And I think part of that also is to talk to your colleagues in MASs and see what other districts are doing and how to make sure that that the compliance of the law, within the compliance of the law, and if somebody's already done it, we want to make sure we don't reinvent the wheel. Maybe there's an easier way to do it. Mrs. Almeida?
Okay. For years, we always had a student come to the school committee, since that law was in effect. I can go back and I can tell you that we have a judge, who is now a sitting judge, who was a member, that came every week to our school committee meetings with the student advisor. They had an advisor that came with them to the meeting. Then we also have a couple of attorneys who are now attorneys that used to come to the school committee and address the school committee and be on our table. This dropped, okay? We still do have somebody who comes to the school committee, but they don't stay for the whole meeting. The kids come, they read a report, and they leave because they choose not to stay at the meeting. They have a seat at this table. It's been a seat on this table since maybe in the 80s, 90s, and I can remember the students who came. I'm not going to say who the judge is or who the couple of attorneys were, You probably all know who they are because they used to come to us all the time. They would tell us everything that was going on. Now they come to the school committee meeting, and they sit there with a little report, they read it, and then they get up and leave. They don't participate. But these people were allowed to participate for years, so it's not something new. I don't know when it stopped or how it stopped. I can tell you when it stopped. And it had nothing to do with us as a committee, because we always tried to get the kids to come. But that's all I have to say. They have a seat at this table. They know they have a seat at the table. When we have the advisory, Mr. Cabral, you've sat there a number of times when I've said to them, you have a seat at the school committee table. You can come to the school committee table. Somebody has a seat at that table. If you can't come, you have an alternate come to that meeting. And they choose not to come for some reason.
What I would like to see is a member of that advisory committee. Well, we've gone back and forth. I know we've gone back and forth with how advisory was constructed. And I don't believe advisory, and we've had this discussion, advisory is a true reflection of the students who wish to serve on advisory.
You're right.
So I
It's
think-
not, because they're
And
hand-picked.
I also believe
They're
that
not voted in.
the young persons who have come before us to provide the high school subcommittee or the high school report have been part of the advisory committee. I always believe it's, so to have an advisory committee, then have someone from that advisory committee come into the school committee, in my mind, would make sense in the direction that we should take moving forward. And this is an opportunity for us to do that.
And this
Yeah.
year, we didn't meet, we met once.
Right.
Because of COVID, we met by Zoom.
I think the important thing on this is it's time to reconstruct, I guess is
Absolutely.
the only way better to put it.
I'm 100% in favor of that, because you know what? This is why we're here. We're here for the students, not for anybody else.
So the
So they
administration will
belong
look into
here.
this and get it, and we can incorporate this. The interesting thing will be to see that if we can get a student to stay, and with the amount of homework and with the amount of everything that they have going on, to stay for a whole meeting, that's going to be the challenge. Ms. Doherty?
Yes, and I will just say that some months ago on a Zoom meeting, there was a youth forum. You may remember the youth forum that was held pre-pandemic at the PACC. I believe my colleagues, Mr. DeMello, Mrs. Almeida, Mr. Pawlowski, and myself were on that Zoom meeting, and the young people who came were talking about the various interests and concerns that they had. And there was a question that was put to us about how do you, us, plan to continue to involve us, them, in defining our future as something to that effect, in participating in the discussions that affect their lives as school children and in the community as well. And one of my colleagues, and I think it was you, Mrs. Almeida, who said, why we are bound to have a person, my words, not yours, but you implied, that we are bound to have a person who would come regularly and participate in the work of the school committee. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for saying that.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing out of this is that they can get this back under organization, and then find the correct student that wants to serve, because there's no sense in, again, this can't come from ad hoc, it has to come through the high school, through the administration, so I think we're on the right path. And thank you everyone for your
Students have
input.
to elect.
Next item on the agenda is
Students have to
unfinished business. School committee workshop, August the 4th. That date is going to be postponed because there's some conflicts within our members. So we're gonna postpone that date. We're gonna come up with a new date very shortly once we talk to Mr. Bent, Dr. Bent, I'm sorry, and we'll float the new couple of dates out. So August the 4th will not take place because a couple of members are in conflict of that date, and we will move that date. So if you just scratch that from your schedule, and Ms. Devine will be in, once we get the new potential date or dates from Dr. Bent, Ms. Devine will be in touch to float, to see who. And Mr. Cabral just told me again, I forgot about this, he's with him at the conference, so he'll be going back, and he can probably facilitate that. So we had a few dates, so we can make sure everyone is available for that. Next item on the agenda is special education contracted legal services, and the enclosure, there's an enclosure on that.
Receive and place on file?
Do I have a second?
Second on discussion.
Motion made and seconded on discussion. Mr. DeMello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Throughout the warrant and the special enclosure, I'm just concerned about fees climbing very, very quickly. Could I be reminded of what we had allocated up to for the special ed law firm for this fiscal year, FY '22?
Yeah, we had budgeted 50,000, Mr. DeMello.
For FY '22?
Correct, 50,000 for Attorney Gay and 50,000 for our special education legal matters.
Oh, okay, so total of 100 for both legal bodies that represent us.
Correct, Mr. DeMello.
Okay. And in your estimation, do you think the 50,000 will be enough for the special ed attorneys that represent us?
Well, you should have received an updated memo because the 5162 reflects 2 months. This 5162 should be May and June.
Yep.
So that's about 2,500, 2,300 a month. So if you break that out over 12 months, over 10-month school year, because the summer should be quiet because we're not in session. Usually we tend to utilize special education matters tend to pop up during the school year, not so much during the summer. So I believe that 50,000 should be enough based on the conversation and the exit interview I had with Attorney Mitchell prior to her departing, and figuring how much time that she spent a month on legal matters. And if for some reason we do see that it's not enough, we will bring it to the Finance and Law and to the school committee.
Okay. The only reason I bring it up, Mr. Superintendent, is because sometimes if we're trying to nickel and dime and save some money in the long run, it turns out a lot more expensive. And having an in-house legal person that can take care of both spectrums, the special ed and the outsource that we have with the Attorney Gay's office, if it was an ultimate saver, and you know how you have an in-house person that you can keep calling and walk up to the office, it's a lot more, how should I say, attractive and, you know, not apprehensive to the clock ticking, you know what I mean? So that's my only request of if the 100,000 is enough, or if you estimate it's going to be more, do we pursue another option? That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMello. Mrs. Fagan?
Yeah, Mr. Cabral, how many people have authorized access to contact those people, the attorneys? I mean, is there a certain group of people that are allowed to do that, or do they have to call you for it?
Correct. Any request to utilize any attorney, whether it's Attorney Gay or Lyons and Rogers, requires the approval from my office.
Specifically you?
Correct.
Okay.
Because I like to know why they are calling or why they need to call, because in some cases, we are able to avoid phone calls based on experience, based on the knowledge base that exists. I mean, we have 3 middle school principals on the leadership team who've had numerous occasions where we can provide support. And if it's something that we cannot provide support and something that I feel warrants contacting Attorney Gay or Lyons and Rogers, then I will say, please contact Attorney Gay, or please contact Lyons and Rogers on this matter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. And, Ms. Doherty?
Are we still on unfinished business?
We are, but if you have an item, I'm going to move that. Yeah, I'll call on you at the end. Thank you. All set on the legal service enclosure? All right. Action items, on the action items, so let me just review a couple of things on the action items. The Oakland Complex, we have the dedication to Mayor Johnson. You all have the enclosure. It's September the 23rd, rain date the 24th at 11. And the administration will be sending out the appropriate invitations for that. The one before that, on the media center at the Mulcahy School, so we had a request from the Carmo family and the Castle family, and I'm going to add on to that, we all received a letter from Catherine Cunningham about having her mother potentially added for naming of something or something on that. So her mother's name was Hattie Cunningham? Hattie Cunningham. So we're going to add, Wendy, if you could add Hattie Cunningham onto that, because I forwarded that letter to you, so we'll add that on there. And then the administration is working on getting the background information on each one of those members, so we can have that. And we'll be looking at that for a vote in October. I just don't know which meeting, but we'll have all the information for the school committee. And the administration has some ideas that they're working on that as well. And then, Wendy, don't forget to add the voter registration drive just as a follow-up on to the action items. Thank you. Anything else on the action items? I'm all set with unfinished business. Anything from the floor, Ms. Doherty?
Thank you. I have a question through you, Mr. Souza, to the superintendent regarding the nursing home facility that we had at one point, through our facilities subcommittee, entertained utilizing for various activities, administration offices. For one, we did a walkthrough. Mrs. Moynihan had a kind of a schema plan to use that space. I'm wondering what's happened to that, if we have approached, if we're still on that track, number one, and number two, if we have approached the city to remand that building to the school department.
I'm still very interested in the nursing home and the grounds surrounding the nursing home, as I've expressed with this board. I have met with the mayor's office and shared our plan and shared how I feel that facility would be a great benefit to the school department. I'm awaiting a follow-up meeting that would be scheduled with my office via City Hall. And there was also another facility that was discussed in our meeting. And again, I will follow up with the appropriate individuals at City Hall, as well as Mrs. Moynihan, to see where we are in that process, because it's alive and well. It's alive.
It's off of life support anyway. Mrs. Fagan.
Just a quick thing. You had this in our packet about the lawmakers, others want sweeping $3 billion investment in voc tech schools. Did you want to talk to us about that?
That was just more for informational purposes, and it supports the work that I've been doing, advocating for changes in the vocational entrance criteria, as well as advocating to DESE and the Board of Education regarding needed change to allow comprehensive high schools the opportunity to offer more programs, even if they are competitive with the neighboring voc schools. So I'm also working with a consortium of superintendents in the area that have led the charge to see some of this work being done as well. So we're going to continue to be at the forefront.
That's what I was concerned about, because I know when Dr. Hackett was here, she started to push this Chapter 74, right, is what we're talking about. And, I mean, I felt like we were living with a bunch of Masons. They kept putting up stone walls whenever you wanted to do something in the high school. And now they're all huffy about the fact that, well, look at what's happened to these schools. Well, you created that monster with what they did, because they should have left those voc programs in the high school anyway, because for the kids that didn't get into there, we gave them an alternative to stay at the high school. So I just love it when they do all this stuff and then they backtrack. I just kind of aggravated me when I saw it.
The cry has been loud, and there have been threats of lawsuits, and I think it's about time that people realize or acknowledge, as we've testified time and time again, it looks different in a comprehensive high school, but it doesn't mean that when a child or a student graduates from Taunton High after going through our CVTE programs, that they're not meeting or ready to meet the industry standards. So just because it looks different doesn't mean that our kids are not prepared.
Well, it was all that stuff, Mr. Cabral. It was stuff about whether you had enough class periods at the time. Every time we turned around, there was some other wall going up. And now it's like, oh, God, look what happened. Well, you know, you didn't allow the regular comprehensive high schools, which we all wanted to do that. And it's one of the conversations we've had here for years, that the more opportunities that we afford kids, the better off they're going to be. It's like having all these sports programs to go out there this afternoon and see how these kids benefited. And I'll tell you something else while you're talking about kids that, you know, why aren't they here for school committee meetings? Most of those kids that are involved with sports are also academically driven and everything. It's kind of like, you know, Mr. Mattis used to say it all the time, a connected student is a better student, and those kids were involved in a lot of things, so I'm not surprised they don't hang around for a meeting, because then they got to go home and do homework. But they've always got 100 different things going, and I commend them for that. But I feel bad about this because this is something that, we were begging for, and I don't think we were the only high school that was begging for this, and we wanted to do that because we knew that those schools were getting to be very selective about their students, and they do a fine job. But, now it's like everybody's all upset about it.
Yeah, I'll just close in saying that Taunton has been at the forefront of this work.
Yep.
And I'll end by saying, better late than never. It's finally, it's rewarding to hear and recognize that the work that we've done is finally being recognized in other school systems and at the state level. And it's also, there are many people at the table advocating for this much-needed change, not just Taunton. Again, I'm part of a coalition group that meets quarterly called the AVTE, and we've been advocating strongly that comprehensive high schools be allowed to offer more programs, because for an 8th grader to make that decision and then realize that it's not the right decision, or for an 8th grader to say no, that they don't want to go to a vocational school, and then realize I should have gone to a vocational school and not have that opportunity, it's a shame. So again, I know you're tired of hearing me say this, folks, opportunity and access, and that's what I want to make sure that our kids have access to.
I'm not tired, I just said that to you, that's how I felt, that's why this kind of bamboozled me. I'm saying, you have got to be kidding me. Well, this has been a long discussion of ours about.
And you all deserve credit. You all deserve credit. You were doing this.
Every now and then, Mr. Cabral, I like to get my 2 cents worth, and that was my 2 cents. Actually, that was worth a quarter. But anyway.
I think that was a nickel.
Huh?
I think it was a nickel's worth.
Oh, it was more than that. Priceless.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you.
And before I go to press time, I just want to, Mr. Cabral, the new softball multi-use field that we have, on that, on a nice little drawing rendering. I don't know where we're at with that. I know that kind of got tabled with COVID and everything. If we could just figure out where we're at with that, and
I'd be happy.
next finance meeting?
Yeah, I'd be happy.
Quick
Just
little-
real quick, as we're closing out fiscal '21, we're also closing out our revolving account. So once we know where we stand with revolving, we will come back to the table and talk about going out to bid to replace the turf, and also whether or not it's feasible through revolving funds to replace the track at the same time. Once the track and the football field have been replaced, then we will shift our attention to priority 2, which was the combo softball field, and then priority 3, I believe, was a practice field along William Street.
That's
So
right.
that is work that we'll probably bring to the committee in August with the updated cost that Arson has provided us, so that we can put a bid out sometime in the fall with the start date to be the last day of school in fiscal '22, which please don't quiz me on the last day of school. I'm still trying to get over the last day of school this year.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but do you have any questions on press time? So this now press time. You're all set? And if you have any questions between now and the end, you can see myself or the superintendent before we leave, and we can help you out.
On that note, Mr. Souza, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Nope,
No?
not
Let's
yet,
get more?
not
Okay.
yet. I appreciate that, and you will get the first crack.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the superintendent to take the floor for a couple of moments.
So I think we'd be remiss in not acknowledging or recognizing that we do have someone who has been with us for many years, who is actually taping his last school committee meeting. So I'm going to ask Steve Jakes, the man behind the boards, to come out and come to the middle of the floor, Steve. So Steve, I let everyone know that your favorite drink is Mountain Dew. So as a parting gift, we all chipped in, and each school board member is providing you with a 12-pack of Mountain Dew. So Steve, please accept.
Thank you.
And I don't,
Speech.
and I don't want you to think that I don't want you to think that I'm cheap. So in addition to the Mountain Dew that you'll be receiving, we also wanted to give you this small token of appreciation that you have to open for us. He's a man of many words. Thank you for your service, Steve. We appreciate everything that you've done to go above and beyond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to say a few words here?
This has got to be,
Marcus, you gotta get him over here, so I'll get him on this side.
talk about a role reversal, right?
Oh, you gotta go over there?
Yeah, it's, well, thank you. I don't really know what to say. Thank you for my Mountain Dew and for this moment. I appreciate it. I've spent 18 years in the Taunton Public Schools and, you know, almost half of my life, and I've enjoyed most moments of it. And, you know, there's so many people that I could thank along the way. You know, I would definitely forget people, so I won't even try to do that. But, you know, I've joked with some of you on this committee that have been here a long time that I don't have quite as many meetings as you have, but I've been around quite a long time and have trying to keep up with you. We've had a lot of memories over the years. I appreciate everything that the Taunton Public Schools has done for me. I am not a graduate of the Taunton Public Schools, but I feel like an adopted son, I guess. So there's so many people I want to thank. Everyone in the room, thank you so much. You guys mean a lot to me. And, you know, going to chase a new adventure and see where the road takes me. And, you know, you all have my number and you know where to reach me. And as I've said to many of you, if you're in the area, give me a holler and, you know, I can treat you to dinner. Maybe for some people I might change it. But thank you all for everything over the years. I really appreciate it. And, you know, best of luck to all of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. On the motion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're adjourned.